Okay. Good evening, folks. It's Wednesday, November 26th. You're over the hump, and you are listening to the Empower Hour with me, Don Wyckoff. Now, if you didn't know, the purpose of this show is to teach people that it is never too late and it's certainly never too early to make positive life change, connect with your passions, and live this life to its fullest while staying true to who you are. Joining me tonight, Miss Emma Rimsa and Mr. Nate Hamilton of Miterbox Media, a Chicago-based media company, and the creators of the award-winning documentary, The Power to Move, the story of one man's solution to overcoming the stranglehold of insurance companies and the unfair bureaucracy by using open source hardware solutions. How you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Great, thank
All
you. How
right.
are
So
you?
you guys, I'm doing great, man. I'm really excited for a couple of reasons. One, I always talk about the passion that people have. I believe personally that when you as you're growing up, we have these these weird little passions and we may not understand them, and I often say that if we connect to these passions, we ultimately will find our purpose in life. And I, of course, always ask that question. Would you say that's a fair assumption of how things worked out for you both?
Um, yeah, I was just thinking about this, how I feel like that's a relatively new concept. Like I think at first it was, what is society doing? What are the norms? What am I supposed to do? What's
Mm-hmm.
going to give me stability? All of that stuff. And the idea of like, what is my passion is kind of a new concept of following that. And I'm like seeing it introduced to kids at younger ages, where it's like, if you follow that first, that will ultimately give you so much more purpose than any of those other indicators.
Yeah. And I
This
think,
for you as well, right?
yeah, I think I mean, I definitely agree with just following, utilizing your passion to kind of guide your life. And I think a lot of times where that kind of breaks down is like people are like, well, I can't play golf all day or I can't, but I think the key is, obviously recognizing what your passion is, what things energize you, what things excite you, and then getting creative and kind of asking yourself hard questions about how can you utilize those skills, those areas, those issues, to guide, whether it's your job, to guide what you're doing in life, and kind of, again, just utilizing what energizes you. And I think that's what's definitely guided our work, with our company and our productions. It's not all day every day is roses and incredible, but it's the overall kind of thrust of your life. I think is, if you can follow those passions and follow those energizing things, then you're on a good path.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, Emma, that you were saying that this is a very new concept. And I think you're right. It is a new concept. It has never been truly encouraged for especially youth as they're coming up. We have this programmatic societal understanding of how things are supposed to happen. You grow up, graduate, get married, go to college, have a kid, pay into the system, and then die. And that's pretty much what we've been taught to do. For my entire life, I've always bucked that. I always felt like, why can't I just do the things I love to do? Which seems so selfish. And that's what I teach. Be selfish. Selfish in the sense that it is, when we're pleased in ourselves, we contribute better to humanity, right? So I'm working on a project now to encourage students to understand those things and then have that connected to curriculum at least the New York State education curriculum, to start implementing that alongside of the Common Core, because we've connected all these kinds of programs through experiential learning, to be able to get students to kind of dip their toes into the things that excite them and then do reports and their little school projects, always steering them within what they are. This is something that just an average teacher can do to increase this kid's awareness of what's possible, show that there's support, and ultimately, by the time they get to college, I think this would be a great opportunity for them to be able to realize what it is they're really excited about. Because how many of us go to college and have zero understanding? We just go there, get the prerequisites done, we'll flip flop on a few major ideas, but really, we're not led to follow our passions. Now, I'm wondering, did you always have this, I need to document, I creating with video or storytelling? Was this always something for both of you?
Yeah, I mean, so for me personally, I mean, I my background is kind of more on the writing side. So I studied English and econ in college. I've had a number of different kind of communications, writing uh, roles and jobs over the years. Um, but I've always been really just passionate about storytelling. And again, like for me, it's kind of been on the writing side, writing for my career, but also, creatively, fiction, drama and things like that. And so it's really for me been like that kind of core of storytelling. And once we again kind of got more involved in video production and building our company, building our business, finding unique ways to really kind of flex those muscles and lean into that storytelling, with just commercial clients, but also obviously documentary work.
Hmm.
I think that's once we kind of found that, that's when things really started to click. And I mean, again, we were just having a lot of fun with projects like
And
this.
that's the key, man, having fun and you just using the passions that you both have. Now, I want to say it is incredibly evident that you two are very passionate storytellers. We've been talking about this show or the documentary, The Power to Move, for the last couple of weeks, trying to build up some anticipation for the viewing we had here. And I was surprised at how many people were just absolutely blown away by this documentary. And I wonder, did you have an awareness of people with disabilities? And if I'm sure you did, but what had it changed after you did this documentary? I'm really looking for what were your ideas about people with disabilities and how they kind of get along in the world before you did this documentary, and did it change?
Yeah.
I would say that, well, first of all, I had, of course, like went to school and had, throughout like elementary school up to college with people who are in wheelchairs and, making sure to accommodate and that kind of thing. But it was not part of the like conversation. I was actually like, I have a cousin who has muscular dystrophy. He's in a wheelchair and he was my, like, he babysat my sister and I in over the summers. But like, so we had a lot of exposure to it, but it was never something that at least we were in conversations about. I mean, the whole idea of like how difficult it is to like get a wheelchair, get repairs done, the bureaucratic nightmare and the burden that is kind of placed on these people to like have this full-time job of kind of going through all these systems to just get what they need to live their lives. That was not part of conversations that I felt like I was in. I mean, I think it's something that like people didn't feel. It's like if you go to a party, you don't want to complain to somebody about the issue you're having with insurance. So
Hmm.
it kind of doesn't get talked about, and that was a big piece of the documentary was that it's kind of pushed down, it's pushed away because and people who are going through this said so themselves, like they're seen as like angry and resentful, and it's just kind of like, all right, I can't, after a certain point, everybody has a bandwidth of like the issues that they can take on, and a lot of times it's stuff that affects them personally or a family member. And so
Hmm.
with this, it's kind of like this matters, but it has to be advocated for by the people in that community because like I already have stuff that I'm doing. But what we were trying to say with this is that it's going to affect everybody at some point, and whether it's age, whether it's an injury, whether it's somebody everybody's going to have to deal with this. So instead of everyone doing this reactively and kind of falling into this and being like, there's no support, what do I do? Why don't we all proactively do something now to fix the system so that when we get to that point, we're not all suffering and, going through the same song and dance that we have been for years.
That's
And I
excellent.
think so I also like my cousin, she has a little boy who he's uh you know has severe disabilities, so he's in a wheelchair, he's nonverbal, and needs round the clock care. And so before making the documentary, obviously I have a relationship with them, and we always love going to birthday parties and playing with him, and but also seeing the impact on families, and what families go through and have to deal with, when they do have a family member that has a disability, has issues that they need assistance with. So, like Emma said, I think one of the biggest things that we were trying to get across with the documentary is obviously showing what this world is, for people who don't have exposure to it, what it means if you have a disability yourself, or, one of your loved ones has to deal with these systems, but also just kind of showing, like, at the end of the day, people with disabilities are still people. They're still, they still have the same, desires, fears, anxieties, issues that we do. And I think so often we heard time and time again, people just said, like, so, like, people get talked down to, people, like,
Yeah.
adults get talked to like their children.
Or
And
people get talked over. Like if there's somebody who's standing next to someone in a wheelchair, they'll naturally talk to that person, assuming that it's kind of like, I don't know if they're gonna, and it's a constant battle.
yeah,
And so much of like the issues, the bureaucratic issues, and like the systemic problems come down to that stigma and the way that we're perceiving this whole community. And that's a big part of the conversation. It's not just how do we fix the structure so that it's not as cumbersome and it's like more streamlined. It's like, how do we all change the perspectives that we have so that we actually want to do that? It's not like we should fix this because some people are affected. It's like all our loved ones are, like, millions of people are affected by this, and this is not how we treat human beings at the bottom line.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think you guys did an outstanding job. I really do. I've been in the world of disabilities, working for and advocating for people with disabilities for 32 years now. Wait, oh my God, 1990, 35 years now. Wow, 23. Here is the director of community relations at the Catskill Center. It's an independent living center that services throughout the counties that we serve. One of the things that you did a great job of making people understand is the disproportionate amount of people that are silenced, that are not heard, that are trying to live their lives. They're trying to include themselves in communities that seemingly don't want them. But I think the bigger point is the lack of education and awareness. I just recently watched a documentary called The Age of Disclosure. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It was regarding UFA or UFOs, UAPs or whatever. What they did so well is brought up the conversation that people are not being informed of something that affects all of humanity, right? So I think this will be powerful. And then I look at this documentary and I see the very same things happening here. It's a new way to present to the people something that is going to affect them. Right now, I saw you did some of the stats on there, but for folks listening, 61 million people have disabilities in the United States. If you look at remember the picture of Woodstock, the aerial shot? Like everybody, it's an iconic image of like almost 450,000 people together. If you times
Yeah.
that by 175, that's where we're talking. Imagine
Mhm.
just splashing that over the United States. 5 million in using mobility devices such as wheelchairs. Now, the reason I think this is so important is because we are constantly divided by the right, the left, what's political parties are like, we're rooting on football teams. It's ridiculous. And very few of the voters who will actually go to the voting polls will be voting for something like this idea, because they don't see how it connects to them. They don't see how it affects them. This really helped to kind of like pull off the bandage that was hiding the wound. And
Mhm.
it lets people see that, yeah, anybody can have a disability. And in fact, by the age of 65, 42.9, we'll say 43% of the population will have a disability. By the age of
Mhm.
65, now we're living into our 80s like almost effortlessly. So,
Right.
what does that say? I mean, we're talking 1 in 4 have this
Mhm.
by the age of 65. why the hell isn't this in schools? Why isn't this something that we learn from the get-go? Not just the etiquette, but the maneuvering that has to take place to be able to get the equipment that they need. And that's the most powerful thing that I took from this, is that it was a quick bite to inform people about something that they have no idea is coming. And that's sad to me. So I hope that this documentary really takes off. Now, it's already won awards all over the place, right? Can you tell me about some of them?
Yeah, so we've been in a number of different festivals over the last year. So we won Best Values documentary at the Anthem Film Festival in California. We screened at the Idaho Film Festival, or the Northern Idaho Film Festival. And then we have a number of others that were coming up in later this year, before the end of the year, and then early next year. So it's been really fun and exciting. Obviously making a film. It was a year-long process to shoot it and kind of plan it out. But then also like editing. I mean, that was a 4, 5, 6 month process in and of itself.
Hmm.
And when you're editing something this large, you're just spending hours, in front of the computer, going through edits, kind of, adjusting things. And Emma's the editor. And then, so it would just be hours of us sitting together, tweaking things, working on things. And so when you're able to finally get it in front of actual people, in a theater, and see people's reactions, that alone is, so rewarding, just to get people's feedback and see people react to the stories. And so yeah, like awards are great, but just seeing it in a
The
theater.
human reaction. Yeah, that was
And I
amazing
want
for
to
us.
touch on something that you said, because you just said, like, if you multiply the what's it called, the
Woodstock.
concert, the Woodstock,
Yeah.
like, and you see the sheer amount of people who are affected. Why are we not talking more about this? Why is this not taught in schools? Why is this not more like incorporated? And that was something that I was very, very, that was a piece when we were shooting that I was very interested in getting to the bottom of and kind of shedding light on, because I think the main reason why is because and like we talked about it, and Thomas talks about it too, like, it is so, the outcomes are so bleak, and nobody wants to have to deal with that. Nobody wants to think I'm going to be one of those people, or my loved one is. But if we could provide people with like the support and the structure that they need to actually move forward, I don't think we would resist it as much. Because now it's like, I can't, no, there's no way. Like, I can't be a part of that. That's awful. I like, that's horrible. They're not getting what they need. They're trapped in their homes. They're on the phone all day. They're fighting with insurance. Mm-mm. But that is the reality. And resisting it just puts more and more people in that situation. And so I think if we can start to show people that, one, if you enter this, you will not be cast aside in the shadows and fending for yourself and limiting your quality of life. There's a movement to improve the outcome. So get on board with that, because you're going to be helping yourself among everybody else that's a part of it. Because it's like you said, getting older, it's an injury, but it's also, if you're recovering from a surgery, like, it can be temporary, it can be long term, but it is not just this piece of the population, and I'm not in that, thank
That's
God.
right.
No. Yeah.
Everybody's eligible. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, everybody's eligible. I have spent the last 17 years doing a piece called Through Children's Eyes. So we had the same understanding a long time ago. So part of my job is to go in and teach disability awareness and etiquette. Traditionally, when that happens, you get somebody with a wheelchair that comes in, hey, my life sucks. They roll out and it's over. That's sympathy at best. But empathy is when you can have the student experience the disability. So I'll quickly go through it, and hopefully we could discuss further, because I have been shooting in different homes, in different areas, and in schools. Video. I'm no videographer, and I'm not looking to do an award-winning documentary. I'm looking to get this out so people understand that we can teach students now without even having to worry about the bureaucracy that's associated with the New York State Education Department or the United States Education Department. If we can get the teachers to see the problem and realize that there's room to be able to integrate this without distracting from Common Core that is established, regimented stuff that they have to do. So what we did, in a nutshell, is we made students disabled for an entire day, where they were in the wheelchair from the time they got to the school to the time they left, and had to participate in every normal activity that they would. And it was self-evident, the exclusion, to the students. And what do you think the first things they said was? This isn't fair. Well,
Mhm.
these kids ended up being so motivated, they were able to write to their school administrators and say, hey, why isn't our playground accessible? My day on the wheelchair, I couldn't go out and play in the snow with my friends. I couldn't sit at the lunch table. I couldn't get into the bathroom without having a friend help hold the door, and that's supposed to be ADA compliant. I taught these students how to do basic rudimentary measurements to determine vertical rise and widths of doorways and things like that. And they were able to do it. Now, these were third graders. These kids were able to get this information before, mom and dad's ideology got into them. Don't talk to those people with disabilities. You don't want to, you know what I mean? The way we were brought up to be more accepting, and really kind of outraged that the environment wasn't accessible. So we did that for 17 years. So we've got lots of data and demographic statistical information that shows the power of this experience for these students. And then also being able to interview some of them long after, 12 years after was our last interview, with a student who had went through that program, who is now in college and is going to be an educator. They're going to carry this understanding to their students. So it's films like what you guys just put together that, I mean, there was a billion ways you could have done this documentary, but what I think is the most bang for the buck out of this has been how easily digestible, how approachable it is to feel the humanity of Thomas and everything he's went through, his families went through, the ridiculousness of how long a person has to sit and wait for somebody to approve a chair that they've been paying into the system as long as they have, and they don't have the right to pick the equipment that will best serve them. It's
Mhm.
outrageous. And so I think you guys did a fantastic job. And if you would ever like to partner with us and work with us, we would love to be able to work with you. After seeing what you guys put together, I would love to stick our money into having you guys, fix this bunch of stuff that we have, and I could just give it to you and say, here you go, Emma. Here you go, Nate. Can you guys make that into a compelling story?
Well, I love, first of all, I can't believe you've been doing this for as long as you have. That's an amazing exercise. And
Thank you.
you're right. Like, it's the only way that kids are really gonna grasp this is if they can experience it. It's really hard at that age to have true empathy, to think like, I mean, we
Yeah.
just shot a friend of mine, Kevin Sullivan, is in a wheelchair. He has I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. I'll send it to you after. Maybe you can put like the text on the screen. But he's been in a wheelchair. He's able to walk, but he anyway, he was giving a speech at a middle school. We were like taking the recording of it, and so many of the kids are like, as soon as he finished speaking, the hand shot up and they, you know, asked questions, and they were like engaged. But that's more of like a, kids need to be on their feet. They need to really experience it. You have to get some, like, inspire something for them to really connect the dots. And I think that what you're talking about doing is the perfect method, even for adults, because I feel like it's we kind of carry some of that forward. We're like, again, I feel for these people, but like I need to kind of turn this off and then not worry about it because it's like too much, and making people like confront the reality,
Hmm.
So I love that you did that.
And I think something that we, kind of learned filming the documentary. I mean, obviously, like if anyone who's ever met Thomas, knows how passionate he is and how an amazing advocate
Yeah.
he is for himself, but also for just the disability community. And like it was a daily occurrence where when we would be filming with him, we'd go into a coffee shop or a hotel or whatever, and within like a minute, he could just like point out to us the things that were not accessible for him. We're making it like instead of being able to go from point A to point B, having to go around the building or whatever, to get there. And so I think two things, like one, like you touched on before, so often when any issue involving like the healthcare industry or just healthcare in general is talked about, it's almost automatically viewed through a political lens. Whether someone's on the right, someone's on the left, those are kind of that's how they're viewing it and the lenses that they're viewing it through. And something that we were very, very careful with and purposeful with is making sure that this film, obviously, there are political elements of this. It involves government policy and decades long, movements. But this is a very apolitical topic and
Hmm.
issue. And
on the surface and on purpose, the way that we
and our
Absolutely.
goal is whether you are, Democratic socialist, love Bernie, or whether you are like far right, like love Trump or anything, like our goals for everyone to be able to view this film, see the issues that people are going through, and come away understanding better, and also knowing that changes do need to happen, and there are changes that don't involve politics, don't involve government, that just are really people coming together to help each other, that can move this forward and kind of move the dial for people. So that's such a bit that was one really big element for us. And the other thing is just there's things that, like, for people who like want to get involved or want to help out, like, you don't need to. I mean, obviously there are organizations like yours that you can donate money to, donate time to, but also literally if you're like in a coffee shop, if you're in a hotel and see that they don't have a ramp, they don't have certain things that are making things less accessible, talk to a manager, talk to an owner. If you're a business owner, if you own things, like, look, kind of train yourself to look for those things more, because once you kind of take that veil off, you'll notice it all the time. And so often, like Emma was saying, like, we hear from people, with disabilities who, because they have to advocate for themselves, they've learned to go to a building owner and, politely say like, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but your building isn't, comply, or it's really hard to get into. And more times than not, people just aren't aware of it. And when they're made aware, they're like, oh my God, like, and they start, taking steps to try and alleviate that. So there are things that people can do every day. And it's really just becoming aware of what accessibility means and
Hmm.
pointing that out to people who, are in a position to make changes for it.
and that's what adjusts the stigma, because if it's only people who are affected by this advocating, it naturally just becomes like that group versus this group
That's
versus
exactly right.
all doing it, and it's kind of just like, hey, this isn't safe, this isn't accessible, and we can all point it out, and it's part of like the mainstream dialogue. Then that's slowly shifting the stigma away.
Certainly. And I think, again, integrating it into the schools from a young age up. These were third graders, and these third graders, after learning how to do like an on-site assessment to be able to determine, levels of accessibility of a place, they would go home. And I would start getting calls from parents that said, hey, man, apparently my home is not accessible. So can you come out and do an on-site? And I would tell them, your third grade student can do that on-site assessment. I'll be here for the resources, but they have the skills to uncover that, and they did. And the amazing part of this whole movement was that these children became advocates, and not because they were pushed in a political way. They just felt what kids feel. This isn't fair. That's not
Mm-hmm.
fair. They also realized why grandma had a blanket on her legs, because if you sit in a wheelchair all day, turns out circulation goes, you start to get cold. And so these awarenesses were starting to happen within the students, but also within the school systems themselves, because they would, once you adopt this program, it really didn't cost money. It was just about tying it into existing curriculum. So we would have a student in a chair, but that would mean that the teacher would have to realize how to set the room up so that it was accessible, and that made them look into requirements for what is minimum. These students were empowered by it, so they were telling everybody that they could, and they're the next community leaders. So with that in mind, I always knew that I've been doing this for like it's 35 years, and Dude, I just cannot believe how much of a disconnect there is. And you just perfectly, made that point, Emma, with the way, we separated it almost as if it's about other people, when
Mhm.
realizing that just like that, it changes. And then you are going to need to know all this information. So I wanted to ask you guys, what was the most surprising part when doing this that you didn't see coming when you began the film?
That is a good question.
Yeah, I know.
I think for
Well, you go first, and then I'll go.
yeah, I think one of the biggest things was because both of us have, family members with disabilities, we knew some level of what people go through when they have disabilities and what their families, have to deal with. So we weren't coming in, from zero. But the more that we learned about just the history of, disability awareness and laws, and policies in the country, and also just the day to day of people with disabilities, from children all the way to adults, I think the scale of what daily life means for people with disabilities, and depending, what your capabilities are, what your abilities are, um I mean, that can, going to the grocery, going to work can be, for someone, a fully abled person, if it's a 20-minute drive, that might be a 3-hour trek for someone. And
And it is a lot of times.
yeah, and like, in the film, like, Devin Hamilton, the
That's
lead
right. Yeah.
engineer, he lives about a half hour from the Rochester Institute of Technology, uh, where he goes to work a lot of times. Um, but that is a 3-hour trip for him, and it takes three different buses. And it used to be a 40-minute trip with it was a direct bus, but the cities changed the bus routes and everything, and like with someone, it wasn't on purpose of the city, but something kind of a casual change completely upended his day-to-day life.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the scale of that was one of the things that was really surprising to us. And on the flip side, the like the small efforts and changes that people can make having an outsized impact for people with disabilities. That was a big surprise too.
Hmm.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I would say I was not aware that just in the 80s, like the typical course of action was to institutionalize people with any sort of disability. And I think that really once we really started hearing those stories, because at first people said that and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe in some communities. But then we heard person after person saying, yeah, one of the professors from
Purdue.
Purdue, his brother has cerebral palsy, and he was born in the late 80s, and they tried to institutionalize him. And once we kept hearing this, I was like, okay, this definitely shifts the way that this stigma has evolved. Because the same thing with Thomas, like Thomas Queter, the main character, his mom told the story of how they tried to, have him turn him over to, the government, and let them handle it, the board of the state. So anyway, all of that, like at first I almost didn't believe it. I was kind of like, I downplayed it. But if we were doing that just a few decades ago, like, of course there's going to be these ripple effects of, yeah, we've improved. And that's what Thomas said at one point, like, thank you, you're no longer leaving us to die. Like, amazing. Now can we actually have a quality of life that's like on par with the average person? So that was like a huge wake up call for me, where I was like, okay, this is like a deeply rooted thing. And there's a lot of shift that has to happen, which is why, like, I think a third of the film we dedicated to, like, the stigma and just changing the way everyday people think about it, so that it's not just this other part of society that I'm not involved with. It's not
Hmm.
that at all.
You know, I,
And I
I I wonder how many people also don't consider that people with disabilities also have disposable, spendable incomes, and so when things aren't accessible, they're not going in to buy, right? So they're not seeing that side of it. But do you guys know the city that is most forward moving in this aspect of accessibility. They pretty much are the most accessible city in the United States, probably the world, but I'm going to definitely say the United States. Take a guess of what you think that might be.
I think I knew this back when we were researching, and I don't remember now.
It would be Las Vegas, Nevada.
Huh.
Why do you
Oh,
think that is? They
yeah.
can
Old
see
people.
that people have spendable, disposable incomes and they want to afford them the same opportunity to go home devastated and broke, just like able-bodied people, right? They figured it out. They know that these people want to spend money. Why should we make it? It's to the point that they literally have, like, those little city bikes that you can rent with your credit card and you can just take it and drop it off anywhere. They're doing the same thing with mobility equipment
Mhm.
there to make
Wow.
sure that people have no problems getting in there. It just underscores the problem, right? We're not paying attention to this as it relates to the economy for sure, because again, they figured out a way to make this revenue driven um, bureaucracy to just create these funneled places where people end up, so that they can save money and just, deny them their thing. Nobody's listening, nobody cares, nobody thinks. But when they start flipping the script and they start making the environment accessible, they started to see, this is Las Vegas, that they were increasing in revenue just because they made these accommodations. Another thing that a lot of folks don't know, they also got tax incentives to do it. Any public accommodation that is making their business accessible can write up to $10,000 a year off from that investment. And then that return is, again, a better community inclusion rate. They're spending money in these stores. A good example, I've always brought this up. Everybody knows Cooperstown, New York, but most people planning their trip from across the country to come see this mecca of baseball don't realize that there are only about 3 or 4 buildings that are completely accessible and ready for somebody to independently navigate and have their experience in Cooperstown. And I've worked with them a lot. They have made some changes, but because it's a historical town in itself, they fall back on this, oh, we're grandfathered. No, you're not. If you made any changes to this building over the course of this many years, then you have to become accessible. And it's become a point where we're almost looked at as the attack of the ADA. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When we're really just trying to make it inclusive for all people. So that again is why I'm so excited about this documentary. You guys did a fantastic job at catching the humanity of the people that are involved. I was blown away at the quality of the people that were actually interviewed. I shouldn't say quality, but who they are and their standing. I mean, right down to the attorney general, the former attorney general, speaking on
Mhm.
this. That's so huge. It's about time that people start listening to this. My follow-up question here for you is, are there currently plans to do another approach at this, like the follow-up, as Tom spoke with you about it? Because we've certainly been talking about it. Just
Yeah,
wonder.
I mean, we've been talking to Thomas and Mobility Independence Foundation about doing a follow up or kind of filming more and then maybe just expanding the documentary. Those are basically, they're kind of in the early stages now, but I think the biggest thing that we want to, if possible, be able to document, and Thomas obviously, is this film really was about, again, kind of laying the foundation, showing people what this world is, and what the day-to-day lives of these people comprise of, and then also showing this, obviously, organization, this group of people who are trying to develop a solution that doesn't rely on these systems that have been failing them.
Mhm.
And so the documentary is really about what this world is and what this solution could be.
That's what I
Um,
love. It's solution oriented.
Yeah.
yeah, and kind of the process of building that. But it ends basically, right before, when they're unveiling the chair for the first time, and we're still, Thomas and Miff, they're still finishing the online portal, and fine tuning like the design and everything. So the possibilities of it and kind of what the effects of it are, we're still waiting to see that, and eagerly anticipating how many people are going to be affected by it, how many people are going to be helped by it, how many chairs are going to be built, with by using this portal and using these designs. So I think there's a lot more story to be told.
Yeah, there is. That's why I was
And yeah,
wondering. And I
yeah,
love
we
the
love.
way you unveiled it. I mean, like I'm critical on those kind of things. I can't watch a movie without picking it apart about background scene. They messed up this, blah, blah, blah. But the pacing, the timing, the information delivery, the time to dissolve it and understand it, feel it, the side that evokes the empathy and compassion is so perfect in its timing. And I'm not just blowing you guys up. I love documentaries. Like I don't watch fiction stuff. I just my brain needs it always to be filled with new, things, so I can do something with the time I've got left on this earth. But you guys nailed it with this, and I'm
Thank
really excited to unveil. The bummer of this is that I've been able to have the showing with a few select groups. We were at the Foothills Performing Arts Center. It was a good unveiling of it. But I feel like a kid with a secret, and I can't keep my mouth shut. I want to tell people about this because when are we
We
going to
will.
be able to put
That's
this
Yeah.
out?
good.
Yeah, when can we put this out? When? I mean, what are we waiting to make
Well,
a larger distribution? How can we and when can we expect that?
it's in a lot of festivals right now, so there is basically a waiting period to find out if it's screening in those festivals. You can't release it until it goes through that circuit. So we're kind of on hold. There are screenings where it's being released, but we can't just like post it until it goes through all this whole circuit. But I just wanted to say, well, did you want to?
Well, yeah, I just to answer. So yeah, we're kind of in the festival stage now, and then once that kind of finishes up early, I would say like late winter, early spring, 2026. Then we're going to start talking to. Hopefully, our goal is to get it on a streamer, whether it's like Prime or Hulu, so people can rent it or just watch it for free. So hopefully by I would say next summer it'll be on a streaming platform, and we'll definitely be marketing that and pushing it out. But yeah, like I agree with you.
But I just wanted to say, like, first of all, I really appreciate you saying all of that, and I almost have trouble fully believing, not believing it, but just like I'm kind of like when we were making it, it could not have been more of a organic like process of building it piece by piece. It was, I would say, like, and that's the nature of documentaries. Obviously, you discover the subject and you let the story lead. But I would say we really built it piece by piece, and there were moments where we were like, where are we going with this? How is this going to work? This doesn't have the elements that it needs, and from where it ended up from where it began were very vastly different universes. And so I think there were periods where we were like, this is not going to flow. We don't have elements that we need. There was a lot of problem solving. And then that's probably the process for a lot of documentaries. But um, I guess the fact that it came together and it resonates is just, I'm really happy to hear that because
We had tears in the seat, we had laughter in the seats, and we had engaging conversation afterwards because it stimulated just the common sense understanding that, holy crap, this affects everybody. And whether you're a person with a disability, I've yet to know someone who doesn't know someone with a disability. It's just bananas to me. This could be fixed so easily by awareness and making it palatable for everyone. And that's the problem, like we had the Architectural Barriers Act of 1968, Rehab Act of 73, 74, then the ADA in 1990, then the Help America Vote Act of 2000. I mean, they've all these acts, but no action. And it requires the person with the disability to actually be the one to launch a complaint. And what do you think that does to the recipient of said complaint? Attack of the ADA. Ah, here they come trying to get money, without seeing the greater picture.
yeah.
I want to say almost elementary approach of bringing this story to light with the human side of it, and then showing how our insurance companies do what they do is a huge step forward in getting people to recognize, hey man, we need to collectively do something about this. You were saying, you were surprised we did it for 17 years with the Through Children's Eyes program. It was actually, it's in the New Jersey Council, and then the National Council on Social Studies picked up this program because we canned it so that it could be replicated in all schools. Even right down to the donation of the wheelchairs and the other adaptive equipment that would help kids understand and have a hands-on, opportunity. It was also chapter 4 in a book by Sandy McCain, a local educator who's working to try to include this into New York curriculum. And it was, after watching this documentary, I just got this little thing in me that said, stop, dude. Stop going with the legislators, because for everything they have ever awarded us, they took away two things, right? I mean, I could show it all day in what they do to nonprofits who are actually helping people. But suffice it to say, it takes nothing more than awareness to make this giant leap for humanity, and just being able to humanize this experience, to be able to show a solution oriented idea that generates ideas for others. One of the great things that happened from this is the reason I asked the question before, like, what did you guys think before you started this as far as people with disabilities, what your experience? Well, we do that with third graders, and we ask them to write an essay or a quick little thing about what is your experience with people with disabilities? What have you been told? And then afterwards, what are your post experience? And then we ask these students at third grade to create inventions that would overcome some of the limitations they experienced while in the chair. These kids, we gave them a problem, and it allowed them to open their brain and just go, well, I'd like a robotic arm that could help me do this, that, or the other thing, or that I could raise up in my chair and get up. We could put an elevator on the thing. Now, all of these things, even the iBot 2000, which is a wheelchair that goes upstairs using, I think you featured it in the film.
Yeah.
These students had no idea of that. They've had no exposure. But when we asked them that simple question, they were given us crayon drawings of these concepts. Third graders, all we got to do is ask them. They're waiting to have the opportunity to be empowered to show that they have intelligence. And things like this kind of project, this makes that happen for them. So I'm like a kid with a secret. I cannot wait to unveil this so I can get into the schools and show this documentary. It needs to be a part of the education that people see. And if you do approach it again, I would love to see you approach the how this understanding, and maybe we could talk after about what I have canned, and maybe it could be included somehow to the understanding that it can be connected to existing curriculum without distracting from what the education needs are, but really truly empower this next generation of community. They're the ones that are going to make the laws, build the buildings, be code officers. They're the ones that are going to make these changes. And to me, it seems like the most batshit simple, crazy easy understanding of duh. Let these kids feel it. They'll understand it, and they'll have more compassion for family members and community members. They'll realize the economic impacts before they're even in high school. That is
Yeah.
what's required, because laws,
Yeah.
they haven't done anything.
Yeah. And I would really love like the next kind of version to have more of a call to action for the individual person. I think this is more of like kind of setting foundation and educating. And then now it's like, all right, where can we go from here? And like Nate said, it's a lot of it is just doing the little details like this curb cutout is not accessible. What can I do like today? But also Thomas had one of the quotes that I think is one of the most important parts of this documentary, and he said like the best way to help and include people with disabilities is to endow them with the ability to help and include themselves. And so I think the whole nature behind whatever we decide to do has to be the people in that situation can't be reliant on someone who is not involved to give them the ability, the access to do what they need to do. It needs to be, the power needs to be within the community who is facing these issues. Otherwise, like you said, it's going to turn into laws and regulations that don't actually address the human need because they're not it's now we've taken one individual and turned that into millions of people. And so
Hmm.
like inherently that's not human anymore. That's a system and it's not addressing the individual. And his whole point was like, we need to be able to do this for ourselves and advocate for ourselves and like join together. And of course, that involves like able-bodied people helping and assisting and champion. Oh, that's not going to work. Advocating. But ultimately, they like that community has to be able to empower themselves and have the power to do what they need to do.
Yeah, I think I mean, one of the biggest themes I think of the film that we really wanted to get across was, like Emma said, the anyone who's ever like had a loved one that's been in the hospital or had any medical issues, you quickly realize that even if you're in an amazing hospital, have amazing doctors, every patient needs an advocate, no matter what they're going through. And again, if someone, if a family member has an accident or something in the hospital, you need to advocate for them for maybe the few days or a week that they're in the hospital and then, in recovery. For people with disabilities, that's an everyday
That's right.
occurrence, and that's an everyday reality.
Hmm.
And we've worked with schools that work with children with disabilities. Like literally last week we were filming a school here in Chicago called Child's Voice that they work with deaf and hearing impaired children. And they obviously teach kids how to use their, cochlear implants, hearing aids, and the equipment, and the nuts and bolts and things. But they said the biggest thing we do is teach kids how to advocate for themselves. And, for kids with hearing impairment, it's like saying like, oh, I can't hear you. Can you face me? Again, not in like a rude way, not in a,
Yeah.
but at being forward facing with advocating for what you need.
So that you're not in the background, so that you're not in the shadows. And that's a lot of what we talk about. Like, how do you take this thing that's kind of like cast aside and make it at the forefront? And
Hmm.
advocating is such a big part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and it's something that requires the confidence to know that you matter, and that's the thing that we battle. So that's why, again, I wanted to get into the elementary level of students before there was preconceived ideas of what all this meant. It just boiled down to this isn't fair, and when they really experience it themselves, they'll do the work for us. We just need to find a way to introduce on a broad like this documentary to be able to just say, here's a solution. Not just my program, but I mean, it sounds like there's other programs that they're kind of riding that same thing. The biggest obstacle we faced was administration saying, sorry, we have Common Core. We have to dip, 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 dip. We have this has to be done, blah, blah, blah. And so we heard that and said, okay, I've worked with two professors at Hartwick College and Suco to align every part of our program with that Common Core. That removed that excuse and more schools were able to do it. But again, it would require something like what you guys just did, a huge impacting moving documentary that is solution orientated, that excites people to want to become a part of it because they all realize, this is going to affect me or my family member or a community member. And for that, I want to thank you both. We're coming to the end of the hour. I just want to say before I go, two things. One, thank you for fighting the demons that you fought in your analytical mind, especially Emma, saying, how the hell is this going to go together? What's the storyline? Blah, blah, blah. Thank you for being open to be able to let that come into you and shape that into what you did. The struggle you guys put into it is evident in the I know this sounds like I'm blowing smoke, but the perfection of such a condensed moment in this documentary, the moments in this documentary that just move you, make you laugh, make you see the humanity side, and then also see that this could be a movement that we continue. And I hope, we can have a conversation at another time on how, if you do a follow-up, how we could focus more on getting people to experience this themselves. I've often, we've had a few opportunities to ask our own sitting mayor if he would be willing to sit in the wheelchair and navigate the city streets in our city, and we were ghosted. Then we had the children write them and say, we are doing this program as our mayor. Would you like to do it? They, of course, agreed. So the kids have power. Not only that, these students that were part of this program were able to actually get a bill signed into law because they put together a video, which I'll send you guys some stuff. You don't have to get back to me right away. I know you're very busy. But if you're interested in seeing, it's a short little, I don't want to say a documentary, but it's a video of the students and their experience in the chair at third grade. And then their demand at the end of it to have them support this bill, which ultimately did pass. And it was because these students did this effort that they decided to pass it. And they said so in their letters, because of your little grassroots things. Sounds like a great idea. We're going to support this bill. So I'll send you the information for that. I want to thank you for really using your talents and your passions to put something so concise and succinct together that anybody can digest and feel it and be motivated to do something. So thank you both. Now, let me ask you, Miter Box Media, you guys are located in Chicago. You are a for hire team of documentarians and storytellers, photography, and all kinds of things. How would people reach out to you?
Yeah. So our website's miterboxmedia.com. So you can go on there and see different examples of our work and different things that we offer clients and organizations. And then our emails is just, so mine's Nate at miterboxmedia.com. Emma's is Emma at miterboxmedia.com. But yeah, we always, we love working with nonprofit clients or mission-based organizations, and also just companies, looking to tell their stories or tell stories of, people that don't have their stories told, don't have their stories known. So people can check us out online or shoot us an email.
Yeah, and we also local to Chicago, but this documentary was shot all over. We were in New York, we were in Philadelphia,
Texas.
Yeah, you guys were all over the place. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not blowing smoke, folks. When this documentary comes out, of course, I'll be spieling it. I'm the kid with the secret. It is called The Power to Move. We will be talking about it over the year as it comes out. We'll be featuring it. I cannot wait. I would love to get you guys some of the video footage of the classes that I do so that you can see the impact of your film on students today and see what that does for them. So I want to thank you both, Emma and Nate, for stopping in. I'm going to end this recording now, but I hope you'll hang out with me for just one more second. All right.
Mhm.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming on.